Final Fantasy XIV has undergone one of the most surprising transformations seen in an MMO. Initially regarded as a monotonous, incomplete mess, Square Enix vowed to make things right. The company not only corrected its course with A Realm Reborn, but demonstrated an admirable commitment to quality. Enormous updates continue a story that only gets more involving over time, while also adding significant features like new jobs and the Gold Saucer amusement park. Heavensward, the first expansion of A Realm Reborn, marks the highest point yet in the MMO's life. It accentuates what were already excellent aspects and provides numerous new dimensions that go above and beyond. With Heavensward, Final Fantasy XIV has undoubtedly become one of the best things to bear the series' name in quite some time. In order to access anything in Heavensward, players must first complete every single preceding story quest from A Realm Reborn and the numerous content updates. It's a daunting task for new players, which can be very frustrating if you're trying to catch up to veteran friends. At the same time, however, the strict emphasis on narrative is one of the core elements that makes the game special. As we got closer to Heavensward, our driving force wasn't new gear or abilities, but rather to see what happens to the cast of characters we'd grown to care about. In every other MMO, it's always tempting to click through dialogue as fast as possible to get to the next objective. But Final Fantasy XIV does such a great job of drawing you in that we found ourselves deeply engrossed more often than not. Heavensward is easily the apex of storytelling in Final Fantasy XIV so far. It focuses on an ancient war between dragons and the people of Ishgard, a fervently religious society that harshly punishes perceived heresy. As things progress, new facets about the war are revealed, putting certain events and characters in a different light. What could have been a straightforward fantasy story instead offers a lot more nuance, effectively exploring the dangers of blind faith, the rippling effects decisions can have on future generations, and the importance of letting go of the past. Yet the story wouldn't be nearly as effective were it not for the outstanding characters, many of whom are new. Estinian, a dragon slayer of Ishgard, lost his family in the war and harbors a burning hatred of the winged beasts. His confident, sometimes callous demeanor gives him a commanding presence. Yzael, first introduced in a pre-Heavensward patch, gets room to come to life in the expansion. She fights for peace between dragon and man, but once a few shattering truths reveal themselves, her resolve is tested. Seeing her struggle with the harsh reality of the situation is one of the most affecting things in Heavensward. Every character goes through tremendous growth and change, feeling considerably different at the beginning of the expansion than they do at the end. It's not just the main story and cast that excel. Side quests are occasionally filled with charming fairy tale arcs. One of our favorites occurs among tribal birdmen known as the Vanu Vanu. Young members of the tribe have to pass a test to be considered adults, and one such Vanu Vanu has failed repeatedly. He tries to cheat his way through the test as you bail him out again and again. There's a lightheartedness to the proceedings that contrasts well with the dire main story. Such vignettes go a long way in humanizing the Vanu Vanu, making them feel like more than merely item vendors and quest givers. Not all the side quests are given the same attention. Mogholm is actually one of the most dreadful areas in the game. Many of the Moogle quests are lightly disguised errands that offer little reason for you to care about them. Tracking down lost Moogles in obscure places is beyond aggravating, and there are plenty of quests that have you do just that. Something that's very consistent in Heavensward is the overall quality of the new zones. Compared to A Realm Reborn, the areas in Heavensward are absolutely sprawling. Despite their size, there's a meticulous level of detail that makes each of them distinct. The ice-covered ruins of the Quarthus Western Highlands exude a ghostly, foreboding presence, while the floating isles of the Sea of Clouds make you feel tiny as they loom overhead. Heavensward creates a powerful desire to push on to see just what the next zone has to offer. Part of what makes the new areas easy to appreciate is the effort needed to fly through them. Ether currents are scattered around each zone, and players must gather all of them before earning the right to ride a flying mount. Reminiscent of the platform puzzles in Guild Wars 2, quite a few of the ether currents are placed in such a way that you have to devise clever ways of reaching them. While it's never especially difficult, the ether currents nonetheless instill a sense of adventure and discovery, offering an appreciable diversion from quests and dungeons. Plus, the exuberant excitement that comes when you finally soar off the ground wouldn't be the same if the convenience was immediately available. The dungeons generally feel a step above in Heavensward. Although many are easily cleared with a group of strangers, clever mechanics and plenty of spectacle make them stick out. In the Great Gubal Library, players face off against an enormous stone monster whose face is actually the cover of a book. During the fight, your group must gather up and run to specific locations, all while dodging the boss's attacks. It's a frantic rush that requires sufficient communication to pull off successfully. Similar mechanics present in other dungeons demand an equal amount of coordination.
Though we neglected to knock, we did create something of a commotion. I had hoped that would suffice.
Heavensward does an excellent job of referencing things from past Final Fantasy games. One of the best examples involves traveling to Matoya's cave, which even features an updated version of the classic song. Matoya is her own character with her own set of beliefs and motivations, transcending the fate of being nothing more than a callback. Heavensward manages to have a respect for the series without being completely mired in nostalgia, coming off as admirable instead of grating. Many popular MMO expansions come with one new class for players to master, but Heavensward gets 3. The Astrologian is a new healing class that draws cards capable of buffing players. However, the draw is random, so knowing when to use cards, when to save them, and when to redraw makes for interesting tactical decisions. The Machinist relies on firearms to dish out damage with deployable turrets for support. The mechanical steampunk flavor of the job is a nice contrast to the more traditional fantasy feel of the other offerings. Finally, the Dark Knight is a powerful tanking job capable of issuing plenty of pain, but players must carefully manage MP. Each of the new jobs provides a nice variation on what's been seen in Final Fantasy XIV before, and all of them have well-developed storylines to incentivize players. New jobs don't get all the love. With the level cap increased to 60, previous jobs get fancy abilities as well. What's great about many of these abilities is they necessitate a different approach. As a black mage, we got used to flinging fire, ice, and lightning in a very specific way, but Anakian, a new skill, throws everything up in the air, requiring more specific timing, which in turn makes fights more exciting. It's easy to get swept away in the grand areas and numerous new features, but one of the strongest aspects of the expansion is its soundtrack. As expected in a game focusing on dragons, many of the tracks are triumphant, as demonstrated by the blaring horns of the main town. Yet there are many surprises as well, such as the electronic track during the Bismarck fight, and the pleasant calm of Idleshire at night. The soundtrack is excellent and stands firmly among the juggernauts of the series. Our biggest complaint with Heavensward is that leveling isn't always as smooth as it could be. Although we certainly don't expect to reach level 60 in a weekend, there are times, especially in the mid to late 50s, where things start to drag and you're stuck grinding to move on to the next story quest. Things that were initially fascinating slowly become mundane by the end of the expansion. Square Enix could have been more generous with progression, and the game wouldn't have suffered as a result. Even so, the vast majority of Heavensward is outstanding, and it's easy enough to endure the occasional slow patch. A Realm Reborn was an impressive revival when it launched in 2013, and Heavensward elevates the game to an even higher level. Rarely do expansions feel so fully formed. A Realm Reborn is no longer a grand apology, but instead a fantastic Final Fantasy game in its own right.